feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank. When it take a swim, only option is to win.
Welcome to the post-show wrap-up of the Shrimp Tank. I'm your host, Rich Jensen, along with my co-host, David Sims, and our special guest today, Stephen McClure, retired CEO of ICCNexergy. We like to, in the post-show wrap-up, kind of bring through some of the highlights from the full podcast that we did with Stephen. This was a fantastic show. You'll definitely want to listen to the full podcast if you've ever wondered what really goes on in the C-suite at the CEO level of an international company. If you missed any of the episodes at all or any section of the episode, you can go to arkansas.shrimptankpodcast.com to hear the entire broadcast. And you can also catch a wrap-up of the video like this on all of our CEOs at our YouTube channel. So, David, I think you had a particular thing you wanted to ask Stephen on.
Yeah, it was a great show. Stephen, thanks for your time and coming up from Florida and sharing your experience as a CEO. One of the things that you talked about was when I asked you the question about what was the most important character trait, or what do you think is the most important character trait as a CEO, and you talked about that. Tell our listeners about that.
Well, I think the most important, at least for me, was to have a vision. And not a vision that's on the wall, but a vision that says what you see the company to become. And you constantly lead folks down the path of understanding exactly what that means. That may mean you want a company to be a certain size. You may want the culture to be a certain way. You know, basically you want to constantly make people aware that your vision of the company and where you want to take it. And it's not just one time. We would do town hall meetings. You get... And not just me doing the vision, we'd have senior staff go out and pass the vision on. So
it's not just a slogan on the wall, it's an actual, let's implement this.
People do vision statements and mission statements, and I'm not a big fan of that.
Okay.
I'm more in the practical stage that you do something that people can feel,
right,
and the results you're trying to get out of it.
Right, actually doing it and seeing the results.
Now, one of the things I really liked your response to, I asked you, what do you feel was one of your greatest successes as a CEO? And you talked about taking a company, get this, from 10 million to 110 million in 4 years, and then having a setback. Share with our viewers what that was like.
We had a company that was lucky enough to hitch a ride in a high-growth market, and we grew rapidly, really with a single-type product. And that was the flaw in the whole thing, is that once something changed or there's a paradigm shift, you're very vulnerable. And so our sales cut in half in the next 3 or 4 years. So what I was most proud of was that we basically retooled what our vision was. Now it wasn't a vision to chase a certain market, it was to chase the markets that we could make money at. And actually put together a plan that says any opportunity that comes out, we measure against that plan. And if the criteria doesn't fit, you've got to have a strong enough will to walk away from an opportunity, because long term, it may not be successful.
Yeah.
And that takes guts.
Yeah, it really took guts. And also, in connection with that on the podcast, our listeners will have to listen to it, where you talked about you actually had to do some really creative restructuring as well. The financial side of that thing was a pretty amazing move, too, as a CEO. Another thing that was on the podcast that I thought was really good, our millennial producer, Gordon Jensen, asked you a question about being a CEO and being in the seat of where he's at his age, and thinking about becoming successful and eventually leading. What are the stresses like? And how do you minimize stress? You talked about that.
It's cracked up to be.
Right.
It looks really glamorous from the outside.
Yeah.
Well, my belief in this is that if you truly want to do it, you've got to realize there is stress that goes with it, because you're the ultimate person that takes the responsibility for success or failure. But what I personally feel is the way you mitigate that is you surround yourself with very, very bright people. You don't try to be an expert in all fields of it. You don't try to make all the decisions. You try to bring in some talent that basically help you be successful. And so you're not in a meeting trying to come up with every idea. Hopefully you don't even have to talk.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, it was a great podcast. I'm sure you'll want to listen to the entire podcast by going to arkansas.shrimptankpodcast.com. You'll learn all sorts of good information about what it takes to rise to the ranks of CEO, where you want to get and what kind of people you want to surround yourself with. It's just really worth it. Take the time.
Definitely.
Don't listen to some shock jock on the radio as you're commuting, but listen to something you can really grow from. And remember, to become a shark, we all started out as shrimp.
Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank.